Chapter 8, Section 3, Example 3. Well, to review a little bit, we're in a part of the book where we're talking about using systems to solve these applications, these word problems. I see a lot of students wander off trying to find other ways to solve these problems, but usually, and that's why they ask for equations. Like when we were in Chapter 3, they wanted you to be able to write the equation to solve the application, those kinds of things. And probably in Chapter 3, some of you could figure out some of the word problems other ways. But the idea is to use, the graphing concepts to visualize and understand linear equations, and now understand how systems work of linear equations. So first you need to buy into the fact that we're going to write some equations here. And I think if you get right to that, then as a goal, and then a goal is to get two equations if we have two variables. In this example we do again. And then go through this translation process, which can be sometimes complex, and it's really about a lot of times using the right tools to organize. And we're going to look at some tables again in this example. So let's look at this example 3. It says Teapots and Treasures sells loose oolong tea for $2.15 per ounce. Donna mixed oolong tea with shaved almonds that sell for 95 cents an ounce to create a Market Street oolong, their name they gave that, blend that sells for $1.85 an ounce. And obviously you're going to take these two things and mix them together. The price per ounce is going to go down from the oolong tea price because the shaved almonds cost less. Well, then it says 1 week she made 300 ounces of this mix, right? And a blend of teas, Market Street oolong. How much tea and how much shaved almonds did she use? Okay. All right, so we got some information. And a lot of times, you can it's a good plan probably to take the easier equation first, which is I have 300 ounces of this mix or this blend. I need to do some things to define my variables. And then if I have let's look at what they use, L for the ounces of oolong tea and A for the ounces of shaved almonds, in which is they probably didn't want to use O because it could easily be confused with 0. So what do they tell me? Well, 1 week she made 300 ounces of Market Street oolong blend, right? Well, then I know that the amount of oolong tea and the amount of shaved almonds have to add up to 300. Okay, so that's the easier equation, and usually that's the part of that. And I do that too. I start looking at this and saying, wow, I got, first kind of knee-jerk reaction to this, especially if we didn't have systems, would be, I don't have enough information to answer this question. But let's look at this. Remember that the goal is to create equations, and if I can create two equations with these two variables, I do have enough information. So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but let's go through the steps of what they do here for solution. It says familiarize. Since we know the price per ounce of the blend, we can find the total value of the blend by multiplying 300 ounces times $1.85 per ounce. We let L be the number of ounces of oolong and A be the number of ounces of shaved almonds. Now they gave us an extra fact, right? Or a calculation to get another fact. And they kind of jumped to this, and I probably wouldn't have got to this until I started making a table that they're going to show us here on the next page. But first thing they do is let's translate this 300 ounce batch that she made. I can make an equation out of there. It's going to be oolong tea, number of ounces plus number of almond slices, ounces, will equal 300 ounces. So there's one of my equations. To find the second equation, note that the value of the 300 ounce blend must match the combined value of the separate ingredients. That's why they jump to that. They say, you know, I could, if I knew how many ounces of oolong tea I had, I would take that times $2.15, and that would give me the price for the oolong tea. And the same with my sliced almonds. So if I knew those two values, I would come out with a number. Well, what would that number add up to? See, and that's where I think I would have probably got to this and say, well, I would have the total amount of money that I spent for the blend. But they didn't tell us that. If I go back to the word problem, I'm saying they didn't say that here, did they? They just said that the price per ounce for the blend was $1.85 and that she made 300 ounces. And I'm going like, I don't see a total price for the blend, but I can figure that out. So there's another step in the process, and that's what they're showing us here. That I could create this equation by remembering that if I want price per pieces of things like that, if I know the amount of ounces or those kinds of things, it's an addition problem when I add these two values together, but it's going to add up to a value that they didn't directly give me, but I can figure out. I have 300 ounces of the blend, and they also told us it's $1.85 for each ounce of that blend. Okay, so they show it this way. This probably, you might have it right here. Here's your second equation, but they also give us a table. You may not have been able to leap right to this part either, but this table is a good thing to do, is say, well, I got oolong tea ounces, right? In a sense is represented by the variable, but I'm just organizing my information that I know. Well, I define the variables L for oolong, A for almond slices in ounces, and that's what they're showing us here. This is the number of ounces of each one, and then they also told us I had 300 ounces of the blend. So I can write an equation, L plus A equals 300. Well, the price per ounce they gave us, right, which is $2.15, and for the oolong, $1.95 for almonds, and $1.85 for the blend. Can I figure out an addition problem for that too? Well, the amount of money I spent on oolong tea and the amount of money I spent on almond slices is represented by these expressions. If I add those together, I should get what it costs for 300 times $1.85, which is the price per blend, right? See how they did that in an organized way? L times this, A times this, 300 they actually gave us. It's not a variable. We know that there were 300 ounces made, and then I can get the value of that. You know, you could, even if she, you know, it's really helping us to say, what happens if I have 300 ounces of this stuff? Because it helps us create that second equation. Well, and that's it. We have the 2.15 times L plus 0.95 A equals 555, which is 300 times 185. So now I have a system. I have two equations with the same two variables. Then I just need to make a decision on whether I'm going to use substitution or elimination. And I think they make a good choice here to use substitution, because you're going to end up with some pretty high or big numbers. They do another thing too we better note, is that they decide to go to cents, not dollars. And what they did really is just get rid of the decimals, which is also a good idea. When you start mixing fractions with decimals, you're going to have a higher possibility of error if you don't deal with those the same way. So they rewrite this equation right here by multiplying both sides by 100, which converts those dollars into cents. I got 215 cents times the ounces of oolong tea, 95 cents times sliced almond ounces, and then I end up with 5,500 cents, right? Well, they decide to use substitution, I think, because I can easily solve this first equation for one of the variables. And they decide to solve for L. You could solve for A, and it would probably be exactly the same amount of steps, work, and everything else. But so they decide to solve for L. Remember that with this substitution, what I'm doing is creating an equation with one variable, and once I have that, then I can solve for that variable and I can get a number in there. So they put in 300 minus A for L. They just replaced that with this expression, because when I solve this equation for L, I get L equals 300 minus A. So they substitute that in for L in the other equation, equation 2 here. Notice they're still numbering the equations. So that's really so when they're giving us the word explanation, they can make sure you're referring to the right equation. Well, here it is with it substituted in. Then we solve this equation. Make sure that you can be careful of making sure you use distributive. You have to distribute that 215 times both parts of that expression, both terms. And I end up with this. I can combine like terms, which is really using the distributive property again. Careful with these subtractions. I usually like to change them to an addition to make sure that I know I'm adding a negative 215 to a positive 95 times A, right? And when I distribute. So I get a negative 120A equals negative 9,000, because they added a negative 64,500 to both sides. And notice they're doing, they do multiple steps. They're not writing out all the steps. If you're still struggling with some of those steps that you're not seeing, it's a good time to review. You need to get pretty comfortable with that. So, and they do actually tell you here, they just don't show each step, in the red they say basically what I said too. And then they do division, which I would, is okay, I guess, in this case. So we get A equals 75. Now, what does that mean? What is that 75 first? Well, that's the number of ounces of sliced almonds. And then if you even went back to the word problem with this, I say, well, he made 300 ounces of something, and I have 75 are this other part, this sliced almonds. What does the other one have to be? And that's where I take this and substitute it back into this equation, because we need to find out how much oolong tea there was too. So if you go back to the original equation, put 75 in there and solve for L, you're going to end up with L being 225. And then I'd ask too, even in the combining of that, I'd ask in terms of the word problem, does 225 ounces of oolong tea plus 75 ounces of almond slices, does that add up to 300 ounces? And yes. Okay, so it fits that definition of that. Now, I will say this, I see a lot of errors where people start, this is tough getting this second equation. I don't disagree with it. That takes some strategy and some experience working with translation to be able to get that equation written. But I see a lot of answers that I would possibly say, at least you knew that these two things needed to add up to 300 ounces, okay? So, but I need to check this also in the second equation to make sure that it is a solution to both equations, or the short version of what I just said, it's a solution to the system. So that's what they do, is they check that, and they put the value for A, 75 ounces, and the value for L, 225 ounces, back into this original second equation, and make sure that it makes this true too. And in this case it does. So the actual solution for this is I end up with 225 ounces of oolong tea mixed with 75 ounces of almond slices to fit the scenario or ask the question you're saying at the end of this thing. And that's what you also need to do, is not put an ordered pair here. All those kinds of things are nice to see because you understand ordered pairs and stuff, but what we need to do is answer the question. And it should come in this form. It should be saying Market Street Blend was made by combining 225 ounces of oolong tea and 75 ounces of almond slices.